Hello everyone, it is Volshock. I'm doing a replay review for BadStrat85. So, if you guys have never played Bismuth Valley, this is it. It is an 8v8 lane map. It's sort of divided into three sections, which is top, mid, and bot. This lane here is either a 1v1 or a lot of times this lane ends up kind of helping mid or sometimes helping top. The top lane is the more common carry position. Current meta on it is essentially you just run to the middle, pork, and then rush T2. So this is the lane where you see a lot of just like boosted Czar, boosted Sheldon. Sometimes you'll see like Hound, Spybot, Welder. That's like more of like an I will conquer type thing. But that's one of the carry lanes, and that's sort of just the common play style on it for the time being. Middle is a little bit more of a mix up of things. So these two players in the actual mid position are always going to push forward and try to get to the midline here. And then these players have a really narrow amount of territory they need to defend. Technically, they have to hold all these mexes, but really they have these like absurd choke points right here that are really easy to defend. So red and whatever this is, light, I don't know, teal, not teal, whatever that color that is, whatever color Space Raider is, these are where you will see a lot of tech happen, either tech or like an air swap, because you don't need that many units to kind of hold the line. And if you go air, a lot of times you can just like fly up, bomb the labs here, and then go through and kind of kill everyone's eco behind it. The geo that's here is sort of up for grabs. A lot of times the person in the lane will take it. If the person here is teching, sometimes they'll take it. Sometimes this guy will take it. It really just depends game for game. And same with the geos that are here. These geos traditionally will go to one of these two players, but sometimes you'll see this guy take it as well. It's just totally varies. Bottom has two lanes. The actual bottom lane, which is this one, all the way on the edge of the map, is still the traditional carry lane. It's a carry lane because one, it's the edge of the map. So generally speaking, at most, you'll be fighting one extra player, the player above you. And just because of how the terrain is, the lane above you is actually on lower ground. So if you take this and then they're trying to fight up into you, they're fighting into high ground, which is advantageous for you. So if you can kind of beat mid and then push up here, a lot of times armies will be there. And so if you win this lane, then it's really easy for the bottom player to carry by just raiding through the back line after. BadStrat's lane traditionally is just going to get to here. And then it can be hard to push beyond that, because if you don't own top and they just put artillery up here, it's real hard for you to just like kind of get rid of it sometimes, because if you have units coming here and there's even just T1 artillery, it can just like shoot at you the whole time, and it's real annoying. But at the end of the day, he wants to kind of get here and do that. Okay, so we are spawning in. This is like the most minor nitpick, but this green circle is your building area. So when you spawn in, because you probably are going to want a 3-mex, you actually want to spawn like just a little bit here so that you can build a mex there. Because if you can build all 3 mexes without moving, you shave off like that second or maybe half second of walking time. And it sounds silly, but like the more time like that you can shave off your starting build, just like the more efficient it is. All right, we're gonna 2-mex and wind is bad. So, okay. So before you even drop, I would just queue all the things so that you don't even need to do this, right? Like you just want to go solar. You want to start south because your commander always spawns facing south, right? So you go mex, the wind is bad, you just know, and then you just go, okay, solar, right? And then you queue your lab, and all while holding shift, and then you don't even need to click or like you don't even need to burn APM, right? You can just watch your guy build and it's completely efficient. This is less efficient. technically you'll e-stall a little bit if you start this max, but the better thing to do is actually start the max, and then when you bottom out on E, then build the solar, because solars are 0 energy. So all you really want to do is like keep building all your stuff, and then as you're running out of E, then you can build the solar. Third max here. What do we got? What do we got? Okay. You only have 45E. So as a general rule, for a bot lab, this is like the super technical version. For a bot lab, you want at least plus 65E a second, like 60 to 65. For a V lab, you generally want like 70 or 75. You don't actually need to know that. All you need to know is before you build a lab, you either want 2 solars or you want 4 wind, or you want a combination of those. So 1 solar and 2 wind would also be fine, right? The wind is going up here, so I probably would have gone like max, max, max solar, wind, wind, lab. If the wind is good, you could just go quad wind. You can go max, or you can go max, max, wind, 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 and then lab. But here, the way you do this is just a little inefficient, because you're gonna have to stop building this to build E. But because you didn't build this E earlier, it won't have been generating E as long, right? So like if you look at someone else, well, hopefully someone else has a better, yeah. So like this guy built all 4 of his wind first, and now he's building his lab, and he's not going to e-stall. So he'll be ahead of you slightly just because he built this wind sooner, and it's had time to actually generate like while he was doing everything else. If you start the lab and then build the E doesn't have that bonus time to actually build up. All right, and we're gonna go grunt. No to thugs, no to rocket bots right away. You want grunts and cons. So let's talk really quick about the 2 phases of kind of like early game. First phase is sort of like an expansion phase, right? So this is your lane right here, right? And in the first part of it, your goal is expanding. You want to take all of these mexes, right? You want to take every single mex here you can. That's the expansion phase. In the expansion phase, the other thing that you want to do is sort of like raid, right? Because there aren't LLTs everywhere. There aren't these set front lines. So you need to cover a lot of ground, right? There could be kind of attacks that come in here. There could be other things that come in here. So in the first part of the game, at the start of the game, you don't want slow units. You can't use slow units because they can't get where they need to get, and they can't raid. Instead, you want grunts. So I would say a better queue for this would be like maybe 2 con, 2 grunt, another con, 5 grunt, another con, 5 grunt. As a general rule, you're going to make somewhere between like 10 to 15 grunts in the beginning of the game before you're going to make rocket bots. Maybe not that many. 5, we'll say. It really depends on the map. We'll say 5 to 15. Because you want to have grunts to like maybe go raid, or you want to have a bunch of grunts here in case ticks or blitz or something else come. The problem with rocket bots is that rocket bots are amazing at killing pork and at like chipping away at frontline walls, but they can't chase and they can't really hit moving units. So you don't want to make them right away, right? Instead, you want a bunch of grunts. Also, just because of the size of Bismuth, I think you can totally get away with opening con instead of grunt. Also because you're having E problems anyway. So if you can get out cons earlier, right? Bot cons generate 8 energy a second, which like for you is like a pretty big boost actually, right? Like +8 actually is substantial for you at the beginning of the game. So it'll just help smooth out your E economy. All right, and we got these 2 coming out, which I like. I think that's awesome. Good work. Okay. This is just something that comes with a little bit more practice and a little bit more experience, but you're currently boosting your lab with your commander, but it's not doing anything. And the reason it's not doing anything is because you don't have the energy for it, right? You only produce 100 E a second. You're burning 106 E a second, but you want to be spending 150. So what you want to do in this situation instead is just put down a solar right here. You put down the solar, and then as you're building this, when your E starts to bottom out, then you build the solar, right? So it's like E bottoms out, you build the solar. Once your E recovers a little bit, you boost the con again, right? And then the E will go back down, and then you boost the solar, and then, you know, it'll go back up, and then you boost the con, and then the solar finishes, and you can kind of repeat it for the next one. Whenever you're E stalling, if you have metal, you always want to make solars, right? Because solars are 0 energy. Unlike wind, right, which is 175, you need E to make wind. You don't need E to make solars, so you can just spam it. All right, and we got this, and we can go raid and check out the situation. Okay, for this one specifically, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. I think it actually probably would have been better if you have your commander keep spamming out, you know, wind like this, and I would actually have this con boost because you want to get more cons out, right? But this makes sense to me, right? You want to get that, and then I would probably just have him wind farm the rest of the game in back. You don't want to commit too many resources early to wind farming, but you can totally, you know, you at least want to have one early game. Bismuth is kind of more of a solar than a wind map, but you can definitely early on scale with wind. Wait, what are your grunts doing? Okay, so a couple things here. I understand why your grunts are here. It's because like you're afraid that, oh yeah, you might get raided, something can like sneak through and hit you. The problem is that you don't actually want these grunts here, because if stuff's coming, your commander's here and you can always just make grunts in your base. These need to go do one of two things. First, I would say they need to go scout your opponent. You need to go see what you're fighting, right? Because like, for example, if you're fighting, you know, if you're fighting like pounders, you don't want to make any more grunts, right? You just want to go straight to rocket bot. Whereas like if you're fighting a bunch of pawns, maybe you don't want as many rocket bots, right? Maybe you want to have like more grunts early on so that you can kind of skirmish. The problem is like, we just don't know, right? Just send these guys over. If you already know what's here and you can't get more information after scouting and or trying to raid, these guys need to be here. They need to be here because there's this kind of like social contract. Not even that. I'm not even going to say that. It's more of just, you need to make sure nothing leaks through here, right? Eventually people are going to have a front line here. They're going to have a front line here. They're going to have a front line here. If you don't have units here to protect it, these guys can just raid through you, right? They can go anywhere. They can go kill all of your allies. Not because they didn't do your job, but because you didn't actually like cover the front. So just take these two dudes and go right there. All right, he's gonna go forward. We queue up 2. It's gonna take the third. You're still boosting. You're gonna go for a third con. Little greedy. This is a little greedy to me, but at the end of the day, I don't hate it. I think that you probably could have just gone like 2 cons because you're bots and you might not need the BP in base here. 2 things here. Always, like, the best part about bars, you just don't need that much APM. Whenever you're building like this, just have stupidly long queues, right? Like queue that max and then be like, all right, man, for the next like 30 minutes, all you do is build win. Just queue up like 50 wins so that you don't even need to think about it, right? He'll just scale your E economy for you and everything's fine. Same with this guy, right? You want him to take these, but you want him to do more than that, right? Because your commander is going to straight walk to mid after. So have him take these and then have him take these and then have him build radar, you know, wherever, like there, right? Like queue up all of that, you know, and then like after the radar, you can even say, all right, yeah, you know, now queue up. Well, you kind of don't want to queue up pork before you see where your opponent is, but like you'd be like, yeah, now queue up like something there. But that's nice because then it's like, you don't need to burn the APM, right? You just say, hey, here's what I want you to do. And you can focus on other things. But you're going to get this out and kind of makes sense. All right. I already talked about thugs. You do not need thugs in this early part of the game. We can kind of cheat a little bit and just see, but let's say, for example, you just had 5 grunts instead. Like, what does he have? He's got 5 grunts. Let's just look at your opponent. All right. So if you would run up here, blitz are fast, but you can kind of abuse terrain on them. And this guy has rocket bots. You totally could have gone like this or like this, you know, and a lot of times, like, because he's vehicles, it's impossible for him to chase you. So you can, with bots, you can literally like run like this and then just go up and like say kill these mexes. And if he tries to chase you like this, you just run down and kill his base here, right? Well, there's an LLT, but you could still like hit the backline for it. Yeah, you'd still be able to pick off like all of that, right? But the problem is just like, you don't do that just because you don't scout, right? And that's why you want to make those faster units. More importantly, if he had those 2 blitz and he raided you and you had thugs here and the blitz run past, your thugs are too slow. They're not gonna be able to catch up, right? And so that's that thing. When you're first kind of in the first part of the game, when you're expanding, you want to make sure, nice, I like this. Oh, okay. You want to make sure that you are, you know, you have fast units. As a general comment, it's really map dependent. On something like Bismuth that has like narrower lanes, you won't need as many. Like Red, if he was playing his traditional lane that's here, a lot of times, like, you'll literally see a red player, like the guy who's here, he'll go like 3 Janus and then just tech, because you don't need that much, right? But on a wider lane like these, you do need fast units, right? And so you might see like 10 grunts or 20 grunts or whatever. Well, 20 might be a lot on this map. A good example for like a lot of pawns is something like flats and forests where it's just open. Sometimes you'll make like 25 pawns before you make any rocket bots. It really just depends. Okay, sorry. Let me get back to my original point here. I'm going to hit you with numbers, but you don't really need to know the details. You just need the general picture. Okay. Your goal is to get to here and fight whoever your opponent is, right? To do that, you need to spend metal into units. Now, a con building wind is going to spend 2 metal a second. In detail, it's for core, it's 2.1 metal a second. For arm, it's 1.9 metal a second. Just say it's 2 metal a second. You have 9 metal income right now. Let's look. These 2 guys, they're burning 4.3 metal a second, which is half of your economy. But it's actually worse than that because you built a nano here and your wind farm is near your nano. It's not in back. So when your nano is boosting, your entire metal income is going into wind, which you don't need that much E early, right? You want to, instead of having all this wind, you want to actually make units. There is the argument that, like, yes, you want to scale your E economy and then later you can convert it so that, you know, you can have additional metal income. You only do that after you've taken all of your mexes. You never want to try to convert E until you've taken all of your mexes, because it's just way less efficient. So at the beginning of the game, when you're in a situation like this, just look at your income and be like, all right, like, how much of this do I actually want to spend on wind production, right? I think you'd be completely fine if you literally just had this one guy in back spamming wind, and you could slow scale it. And if you end up with more metal and you need a little bit more E, as your commander is walking, you can just drop solars, right? Like, if your commander's here and you're like, oh, you know, I have whatever 500 metal and I'm starting to E-stall, just like, oh, solar, you know, solar, and then he can keep walking. But to do it like this cripples your military, because literally your entire income is going into it. But it's also one of those things where, like, as you get more metal, right? Like if you're at, say, 20 metal a second, then maybe you're justified in spending 4 metal a second on wind production. But always just think about that balance of, like, you're overscaling your E. All right, we set the rally a little bit further. We still don't. We need to see what's here, my dude. We need to go exploring. We need to go into the great beyond and actually see what our, that's awesome, what our opponent is doing. All right, I like the radar. I would say generally you want to drop the radar in your base and then move out, but I like that too. Okay. Comm is walking. And this is another thing. I would just walk your comm straight forward and take these and then just like LLT, LLT, LLT. We talked about this. So once you know, if you have say 10 grunts here, then I'd say you're probably safe to start making rocket bots, you know, and you'd probably want to go like 5 Roccos to 1 res or 4 Roccos to 1 res. It's kind of just dependent on playstyle. And you're still expanding. Okay. You really need to, so you really need to send these forward because you need to know where his comm is. You need to know where his comm is and what his army is, because where you set up your front is going to be dictated by where his commander is, right? The middle of your lane is right here. So if both of you guys hold all the mexes in your lane, you're equal, right? But if you hold these mexes and let's say you get to mid first and you build LLTs like here, and your LLTs deny his mexes here, suddenly it's a massive boost, right? Because you're going to get a little bit more metal, but I think this lane on Bismuth, if you own all the mexes on your side, it's like 21 metal a second or something. So if you lose whatever that is, 5.6 metal a second, that's a massive blow to your income. And that's one of the most important things when you first get to the front is you want to actually set your front. I don't remember if I watched some of this game live. I don't remember if you actually finished these here, but hopefully not. So just as a comment aside here, like here's another con that doesn't really do anything. I think you're about to select him and have him do something. Micro and bar can feel really challenging because you're like, oh my God, I need to like do this and then I need to do that. But like the easiest way to get around that is just to have really long queues, right? Like if you queued up all of this and like the radar and everything, then you would have been fine. And you know, like same with these guys, like you only queued up a small amount of wind and there's BP near it. Also, it's getting on 5 minutes. You always want to make e-store. You know, just like queue up really long things so that you don't need to actually like have high APM. You can just be a chiller. All right, I'll try not to jerk around so much. Sorry. Okay, I like this as a forward position for a lab. I like the idea of a forward lab. I wouldn't build these nanos first. If you want the forward lab here, well, I would say you probably want to pork first anyway, but if you do want the forward lab here, you don't have metal anyway, right? So you just want to put down this lab and then you could have your, you know, your commander boost the lab and then your commander could keep going forward. But like, I would still probably make units from your back lab first until you actually get to where the front line is here. Because if you can set like an aggressive front line, you just end up much, much better. So the reason why you don't want to do these nanos is because you're already M-stalled. This is 400 metal, and then you can make that. So you're not going to have like, you're so unit deprived. Like where is, you know, these guys all have just like way more units than you do, and they should probably have more. Not because like they have much better eco, it's just that they kind of like allocated their resources better. All right. Why did you stop here? It's free real estate. All right here is just free real estate. We can just saunter over and just la-da-da, taking mexes, get all the metal, right? If nothing else, you want to make sure you get to mid and at least secure your own mexes. If if you can secure your mexes and he secures his, okay, yeah, it's fine. But if you can secure your mexes and you can deny his, you have a massive lane advantage, right? You just like willingly stopped here, but I'm not sure why. I could understand maybe like one LLT because you're afraid of a run by, but if you're going to do that, I'd still probably run up and put it like here, maybe. And then you could max and then keep going forward. And then you want to have an LLT that's like in range of theirs. But where's his commander? I mean, there's nothing in front of you, right? And if you take all of these, right, like you're stopping here and you're M stalled, right? You're trying to burn way more metal than you have. That's what, like 5 point, that's like 11 metal a second. I mean, that's like a 50% boost for you, but you just stopped here. Just, I'm not even sure why. So next time when you're playing, try not to just, don't stop in your lane until you've like been stopped, basically, right? Generally, if you have faster units, you could have been raiding and like running through and stuff. But if you can't raid, like if you run up and you're like, oh my God, there's 4 LLTs, say there was like a whole line of LLTs, just pull your raiding units back. But that's fine. That just means that you can take more mexes, and then you can, you know, if anything, because you have a con here, you could even walk your commander forward and take these mexes and then just like have your con backfill those if you want, and then you can pork here. All right, this has been happening for a while, and this is, this is not ideal. You're probably not as familiar with Bismuth, so there's a couple of comments here. One is you've been overflowing E the entire game, right? So it's like you built all this energy, but you haven't even really needed it. You've just been like feeding your team, and I'm sure they're happy. I bet some of them even have like converters. Yeah, like these guys are like spamming converters now. They're like, oh yeah, our ally is such a good ally. He's just pumping us full of E. You don't need this much wind early, right? It's just essentially you've just been like feeding your team. So whenever you're at a surplus like this, you always want to make converters. Generally speaking, you want to make E storage before converters. You don't want to make A solars here because you have control of your lane, right? And you have a ton of E. And A solar's what is a core one? 370? Yeah. A core A solar is 370 E or 370 metal for 75 energy a second. A Geo, which you have right next to you, right here, is 540 metal for 300 energy, right? So it's like 1.5-ish the cost for like 4 times the value. So it just makes way more sense. Not that you even need more E because you've just been overflowing, but it makes way more sense for you to build the Geo here and just have your one con in back spamming wind. And with your other con, right? Also, whenever you plan to forward lab like this, you always want to eat your back lab because if you're not using metal, just get rid of it. And then this guy could, you know, he'd build that, and then you could probably, oops. This is where you'd also probably want to build your converters. You want to build them off to the side so that they don't chain. All right, we need attack, attack. Oh yes, here we go. Here we go. So, all right, you drop a couple LTs and you start moving forward. I like this. This is much, much, much better. You want to keep going forward. So if you had done grunts, you could have raided, but like at this point, now that you've kind of started, once you started to really set your edge, you want to immediately swap to rocket bots, and you just want to drop a ton of rocket bots early. This is a little sketch because you don't even know what you're fighting, right? So like theoretically it could be, I don't know, there's nothing that really counters rocket bots in this meta, but like, I don't know, it could be like walled Wolverines, or that doesn't really even counter it. I don't know. It could be something that's harder for rocket bots to fight into, but the problem is you just don't know, right? We got to scout, and then once you're set, then you can start spamming rockos. Okay, a little follow up here. All right, so we see this guy who isn't your lane opponent, but who is the person you're fighting, and you get a little scouting info here. Okay, so this is the guy you're fighting, right? And he's thugs, and that is kind of like music to your ears, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, if he's thug and I'm Rocco, you can just crush him because rockets outrange thugs and they have slightly more AoE. Instead of taking these mexes once you know you're contested, I would build LLTs that deny them. So you can build an LLT like here and here and here and here. And what that does is, yeah, you can't secure these yet, but you don't let your opponent have them. And then as you're fighting over here, you know, your army's here, and if you actually manage to push him back, then you can take the mexes. But if you try to take them beforehand, especially with no reinforcing units, it's a little early, with no reinforcing units, it's going to be a lot harder. So instead, just build LLTs that deny them. Trashers are a great thing to have, like when you're raiding, and in a lot of situations you generally won't need it on a lane map because no one's going to start air, or if they do start air, you know, you can generally just punish them. If you see Shuris on a lane map, then you can make AA, but especially early on, it's important that you put all of your resources into units. And the reason why is because the more units you have, the harder you win, right? Like, if you guys just fought with 2 thugs and 2 thugs, 1 thug will survive with like 10% HP. But if you fight with 2 thugs versus 4 thugs, which is 200 metal, you know, more, they'll probably kill both of your thugs and maybe lose 1 thug, right? And so it's one of those things where like all your early resources, you want to try to funnel into units because early battles can snowball really, really fast. So as soon as you see this, you want to start dropping LLTs, but he just had more units than you do now. So you could walk up and degun this, but for now we can back up. Okay, so if you're ever in these, so first of all, a couple problems. Your lab has been idle forever, so you're just floating insane amounts of metal. So whenever you queue these forward labs, you did it on your starting lab, which was like awesome. You had a bunch of stuff queued. Just as soon as you drop the blueprint, just queue up, right? Just go like 5-1 or 4-1 and then repeat, and then just do it to the front. Also, when you're fighting something like this, that's like this massive sort of like, you know, rocket bot thug type thing, your best friend are going to be Dragon's Maws. These guys, you can just drop like a couple Dragon's Maws and then put walls in front of them, and they're super hard to kill. And if there's a lot of them, you can drop an HLT and then put your army in front of it. And what happens is, like, you never want to put an HLT forward because they'll just kill it. But if you have an HLT like here, for example, it denies the mexes. And every time their units come in and your units are here, you fire, they fire, but your HLT also fires. And so it's like, you end up winning all of those exchanges because your HLT like helps you trade better. So in this situation where you're like, oh, I'm kind of outmatched, I would start spamming pork, right? You can drop some Dragon's Maws and you can kind of do that. And now we're going to start. All right, rocket bots on repeat. That works. This is a situation where if you had an E-store, you could probably kill this army, because remember, comms that are cloaked only show up on radar, and I don't know if he has radar here. Let's see. Oh no, he does. I lie. So you could hide in the radar shadow here or here, but like if you cloak and run here, he can't see you, and then you can just degun all of this. Or same thing, if you cloak and run here, you can just degun all of that. The problem is that you can't cloak because you don't have E-store, right? Cloak is 1,000 energy a second if you're moving, 100 energy a second if you're standing still. We already talked about that. You want to make the Geo instead. You can definitely make A-Solars on some of the other positions on this map, but from what we've seen, you haven't needed E. So it's like you're spending all this. Yeah, okay. You need to dump. Well, now you need to. So now you do need E because you're trying to make units, but you're making A-Solars. So keep in mind, A-Solars are a ton of energy, right? It's like 4K energy for core. It's 5K energy for arm. If you're trying to like quickly make units to fight something, you don't want to be making A-Solars or even a Geo. A Geo is 13K E. You want to, like, you know, be spamming basic solars, and then once your E fixes, then you can make A-Solars and you can eat your B-Solars. The problem is, like, right now you can't make any of these, you can't make units as quickly as you want to because you're E-stalling. Okay. The old The old double wall. This is great for a lot of stuff, but it needs towers behind it. Specifically, this guy needs to just come up here and build Ma's behind it. If you just went like Ma, and then maybe even the HLT here. Yeah, that'd be perfect, and you could hold that. So he's gonna fortify this. Okay. Whenever you pork like this, you never want to build towers together for 2 reasons. First reason, more or less all the T1 units that are going to shoot at it have AoE. So rocket bots I think have like 24. And thugs, do you have a thug? I think thugs are less. They're like 18 or something. Yeah, they're 18. So, oops. So if a rocket bot fires and let's say it hits right here, that AoE, which is really small, is still going to hit both towers, which is a huge problem, right? So you don't want them together because you don't want them to take double damage. You just need to space them out. The other more important thing is, especially in rocket bot wars, you never want to like group radar dots because that's one of the easiest ways to avoid damage. Before you have pinpointers, these radar dots can kind of be, you know, slightly off from where they actually are. So like, for example, this guy here, just, you know, pretend you have a concave like this, even though you couldn't have one here, right? And it's like, okay, he fires, he fires, he fires, he fires, he fires, right? Like these are all rocket bots shooting at it. The actual LLT is here, right? So like these guys, all these guys will miss, and like maybe that guy hits and maybe that guy hits. But the point is that radar dots aren't where you think they are, or like aren't like where they are a lot of times, like they're moved around, right? The problem is that if you put a bunch of like towers together right next to each other, then the radar dot being in a different position doesn't matter because there's so many things there that they just can't miss, right? They just shoot the rockets and it's like they hit something regardless. And so that's why you don't want to do that. Always spread them out. Okay, and we're gonna drop Maz. I would say in this situation, because you already have HLTs, I would probably drop, or you already have LLTs, I'd probably drop a Ma first, or sorry, drop an HLT first. An HLT will let you out trade all of this. Second would be a jammer. Okay, so we burned through a lot of our E. Definitely. Do you not have auto group set up? So you want this rally to the front, but the other thing too is like, right, if you alt 2, you automatically add those units to the group. So then whenever you hit 2, they automatically come. That's probably the easiest thing to do. I would just make sure you have all these rocket bots on auto group so that when you're microing these rocket bots, the ones behind are still coming forward with you, right? If you don't have auto groups set up, I would definitely recommend them because it makes microing something like this really easy. You don't end up in these situations where your rocket bots in back aren't coming with you. This is another situation where a jammer right here would be awesome because you could just cloak your comm and kill everything. But you can probably go up and degun. You had a chance to degun. So right here, like if you haven't played the map, you probably haven't lost a game to getting hit by someone hiding in radar shadow there, but this is a common place for comms to hide and it's giga annoying. But if you just cloak your comm here, right, and then he walks up, you can degun that stuff. Thugs are really like thugs are great at killing commanders, so you have to be careful. But this is totally one of those things where if you just cloak there, if you have E-store and cloak there, then you just come up and degun and your comm can probably hold and kill this entire push. Okay, we got more rockets coming, which is nice. Don't even trade with this. I would say you just want to, if they come in like this, you just want to degun. Ooh, okay. Thugs have less range, right? Thugs are, so that's it. Thugs are 380 range and rocket bots are 475. So it's a pretty substantial difference. What you're doing here is you're moving your rocket bots into range of the thugs, and you don't want to do that. If you hit F and do a fight command and drag kind of like this, your rocket bots are going to walk just until they're in range of it, right? So like, for example, this guy would stop here and he would shoot at this one. But if you select them all and hit F and line drag, then they'll attack at max range. At no point do you ever want to run rockets into thugs, because that's what the thugs want. Thugs are much more dangerous in close quarters. So get in the habit of using a fight command, like a spread fight command, just F and drag. You can actually like F and drag a little closer because they'll attack at max range. Then if the thugs walk at you, then you can move command back, right? So you move command backwards, you fight command forwards. And then when they come, you move command back, you fight command forward. You need to be really careful. All right. So if you're gonna, there's kind of a couple things you can do here. If you're gonna run at an army with your comm, your army can't be anywhere near it, because when your comm dies, you're gonna kill these, but you're gonna kill your own army. So if you want to run your comm at an army, pull your army back first. Also, if you're gonna run your comm at an army, keep in mind, like, your D-gun range is huge, right? It's this circle here. You could have D-gunned like the vast majority of this, just like D, right? You just D-gun all that. So try to just like be pretty cavalier with your D-guns. Just shoot them out, especially because you have a ton of E. The problem is if your comm pops here and then you lose a bunch of your army. This is one of those situations where like having res bots in with this is really nice, because a huge part of T1 micro is just repairing. All right, real quick. Well, keep going for now, I guess. You spent so much of this game just like dumping resources into E to like keep scaling E, right? Like you haven't needed this much E for pretty much the entire game. The only reason you're draining so much E right now is because you're trying to build an A solar. You don't need this much E, right? It's much better to just take Geo and then just like scale one behind until you're sure that you want to go T2. I would say you're overbuilding E. So just try to be a little bit more cognizant of that. So again, these thugs can shoot you because you're like running into them. Run back, fight command forward, right? Run back, fight command forward once you're out of range. The goal in any of these fights is to have, like, you have LLTs you can retreat to, right? So your rocket bots outrange the thugs. So if you fight command forward, they shoot the thugs at range. And then when the thugs walk up to try to shoot them and you walk back, the thugs are going to enter your LLT range, right? And so that's how you want to play it. You also want to have direct vision, but we can talk about that another time. All right, let's speed things up a little bit here. All right, for some inexplicable reason, he backs up. Whenever you're in a situation like this, where you're in a losing lane and they have more units than you do, you kind of can't out unit them. Like you start mass producing units here, it makes way more sense for you to just giga pork your lane, right? Just like throw down an HLT, you know, throw down some twin guards, like put a maw, maybe like build a wall there or something. But the only way that you can beat this guy right now, if he marches his army in, is if you have pork. So you can kind of like slow pork crawl forward. He left a bunch of wrecks, which is great. So you have the res bots now you can eat or res them or whatever. But when you start to lose a lane, you can't try to win back a lane with units. He just has more units than you do, and he has a commander. So you have to just pork and then tack or air swap or do something else. So that's kind of a good example, right? You were shooting at this LLT, but missing, and because there was stuff behind it that was grouped, the rockets hit both of them. Just as a callback to the earlier comment. And he's making kind of the same mistake you were, and so both of those hit. All right, a little bit better control here. All right, past like 10, granted, this is a lower OS lobby, so people will probably tech slower, but past say 10 minutes, you really want to try to find a T2 from someone. So I think you guys were on voice if I remember correctly. So I would just ping him and try to get a T2 ASAP because you need that metal to actually make units. Okay, so you push him off. All right, so now things are getting a little crazy. Okay. You have 3K metal worth of T1. And if you think about it, like 3K metal worth of T1 is essentially a T2 lab all by itself. You could have teched by yourself. But more importantly, if you just spent like, say 2K metal in pork, which is a lot of metal for pork, and you just pork this lane, you'd be safer than if you made these units. And once you have that pork, it's great because you can just eat your lab and then immediately go T2 yourself. But instead, you're hard committing into T1, which you don't want to do, right? Just think about it from a resource perspective. He owns these mexes. You don't own these mexes. He started with more units and he ate your commander. He should be able to outproduce you, right? That's just how it is. It's just a numbers game at that point, right? It doesn't matter what he makes. He'll just have more of it and he should be able to beat you. So you can't send the same thing back to him. Okay. This happens every time the wind peaks. One, talked about e-storage a lot, but like you have so much e-production that you just have been overflowing this whole time. Yes, it makes sense to kind of drop these, but I think you probably overbuilt a bit. But regardless, you should just get in the habit of trying to have a few more converters so that you have more metal, because you definitely need it. Okay. It's a nice thing to go up there and help, but like, let's just do a little count here. That's 6K metal in T1. That's like a T2 lab and a persecutor right here that just kills everything, right? Yeah, I don't really know, but I like this. This is a good flex up. You're gonna go up, try to flex and help him there, which is nice. And this guy doesn't do too much. Yeah, you could have, oh, okay. And so you get given, all right, you get given a T2 bot, which is awesome. As soon as you get a T2 con, first order of business should always be to upgrade your mexes. And you don't even really need the E right now, because once you finish that geo, you'll have Giga E regardless. So what I would do is drop like 4 cons or 5 cons and just have all of them guard the T2. And instead of doing this, I would say take that, take that, take that, take these 4. Right? And then at that point, then like maybe you could drop a fusion, or if this is safe and you can AGO, you could AGO this. But this doesn't look super safe because like these guys have already kind of lost top, right? And your lane, you've already lost. So trying to build an AGO here is like super risky. Not to mention that like tons of players, once they hit T2, will just put Artie up here, and most Artie is in range of that. So you just won't really be able to do it. So instead, up your mexes first and then worry about your E situation later. All right, I think I told you to, if I remember, this is when I was like, eat all your Roccos, go T2. All right, T2 is up. Okay, so I told you to make bed bugs, but I don't think I really explained it as much. There's a few things you want to do here. First of all, I would say you want to make bed bugs just because that's all T1, or primarily T1, and you want to be able to kill it. And bed bugs are just god tier into mass T1 like that. They'll just shred them, right? The other thing you want to do is you want to pork your lane with T2, right? Like your lane is super screwed. This lane is kind of screwed. You want to try to like help all these lanes. The easiest way to do that literally is just like, you can even drop a couple nanos here, just like nano. But if you have your if you build another T2 con here, you can Persecutor right here. That Persecutor covers your entire lane and most of Red's lane, right? Look at the range of that. And that's like 2k metal or 2500 metal, right? So if you build it here, it's way more beneficial. Also because this guy has Sheldons, right? And if you're trying to fight Sheldon into Sheldon and he has more resources, you're not going to do it. You need something like Pork or good spy bots or bedbugs to like win that. But if you Persecutor here and he tries to come up and fight you with Sheldons, when you go fight him back, you can out trade him just because Persecutors are really good into other artillery, right? So instead I would say just Persecutor here. You could also like Perse here maybe, and then like it'd be harder for the Sheldons to hit because of LOS. The only problem is you can't, it's going to be really hard for you to Pork here because you lost top, right? Like a lot of times you see a Persecutor kind of like here. One, it can hit your Geo, but two, it can kind of kill all the Pork here. So that's why like on the cliff up here is nice, and it helps you kind of secure mid for your allies as well. Okay. I told you when I was watching on stream, like eat your rockets, but keep your thugs. The reason why I said that wasn't because rocket bots are bad and thugs are good. It's because you want to make Sheldons from this lab, right? You're going to make like jammer, radar, 10 Sheldons, maybe an ARB, or 8 Sheldons and an ARB, or 10 Sheldons and 2 ARBs, whatever. But Sheldons and ARBs, if they get run at, they just die. So you want to keep all of these thugs back and alive as long as possible because they're your meat shield. You already saw that there are Sheldons down here, right? This guy has Sheldons. There's no world where your thugs are going to be able to kill a bunch of Sheldons, right? Like they're slower, right? It's 45 versus 50, and the Sheldons just have max range. And even though this guy's kind of AFK, these Sheldons can kite your thugs forever. So you're not going to be able to do any real meaningful damage with this push. So instead, just keep them farther back so that you don't lose these units and you can use them later as a meat shield for your Sheldons, right? Okay, you're getting a little bit more BP, which I like. That's awesome. You do finally build some converters, which is nice too. So even if you don't Pork here, you still want to throw down more T2 Pork. You really, really want to get a con, and you want to make Sabos, which are these, right? Even just like one here will be super value because they have great AoE and they just destroy T2, right? Or T1. And if something like bulls come in your lane, they can actually trade decently well metal per metal with bulls. So like if you just go like Scorpion, Scorpion with a Persecutor there, or even like Persecutor, Scorpion, Scorpion, something like that, it's going to make it really hard for this guy to push your lane. So yeah, just get in the habit of having a little bit more Pork, and you can just throw down Twin Guards. Twin Guards are just insanely good for what they cost and what they do. It's always great to have some Twin Guards just because they crush T1 and they're pretty good against early T2 like Fiends or Jags if you have enough of them. All right, and this guy's kind of flexing down here. Okay, so you weren't really sure how bedbugs worked and you sent them. Whenever you use bedbugs, what you want to do is take off fire at will and put it on hold fire. The reason why is that a bedbug, when it attacks and dies, normally is going to have this explosion. If you self-detonate it, or sorry, it's going to have this, yeah, and then if you self-detonate it, it's going to have this bigger explosion. So if you leave them on hold fire and then run them in, and then once they're in, you control B, then when you control B them, they instantly explode. There's no countdown, they just pop. They'll do more damage over a wider range. So like even these guys, right? I mean, this is 200 metal. Well, granted, this is probably a lot of E, right? But this is 3k metal and 2700 E, right? And this is like 200 metal and you had a bunch of E anyway, but these are going to come in. I did like 2k metal, right? And so like that's one of the great things about bed bugs in a situation like that, where there's a bunch of mass T1, you can just bed bug and just like shred stuff with them. All right, this replay, this is getting a little long and this game's kind of getting out of your control. Once top falls, I think you need to like flex up and then some other stuff happens. The biggest things I would say as a takeaway for you are, one, don't overbuild early E, right? At one point you were spending essentially your entire economy on energy production that you were just overflowing to your team. Two, think about your unit choice a little bit more. At the beginning of the game, you want to have more grunts and you want to send those grunts to go raid and to go see what your enemy is doing, right? And then you want to make rocket bots. For the time being, I would say just don't make thugs, because there's very few lanes where thugs are good. Thugs are awesome units, but for now, rocket bots are just better in the vast majority of situations. So first, try not to overbuild your E. Second, try to focus a little bit more on unit comp. And then third, think about, especially early game, like where you set your line. I think if you had just started porking here and had rocket bots, you could have denied these mexes and you could have had enough rocket bots to like fight something else, right? And if you had had some HLTs, not some, if you had literally just had one HLT, you probably could have just killed everything this guy had. And then when you get to T2, you can pork there as well. I'm probably not going to watch the rest of it because it's one of those things where it's like now a lot of mistakes have compounded, so it's hard for me to give you like great advice in the moment for it. Other small things, like if you're in a Sheldon versus Sheldon war, you need to go Spybot, because if you land a good Spybot, you can just like stun, like one Spybot will stun all of that, right? And then you can just dive in and kill it. So in Sheldon Wars, you want Spybots for that. Oh my God. Yeah, we're not even going to comment on that. Anyway, that's it. I hope that was helpful, BadStrat. If you have questions, just let me know. See ya.